Hans Valheim Lockett. Introduction by Maxim J. Anderson. And the subtitle is The Life, Reign, and Character of Haile Selassie. The Life, Reign, and Character of Haile Selassie first. Alright, there we go right there. Now some of you know that there's this picture and there's another picture just like it. One is king and one is king of kings. Go check it out. There's another picture similar to this, but it's different. In other words, it's not the same. It's not, I mean, it's the same. You could say it's a coronation picture, but one is the coronation as king of kings, and one is the coronation as king Tessari, or King Tefari, in 1929. Now, 1929 is a very good year. But now we have some interesting years as we start to examine the facts. Now there's another book. Let's see if we have a copy of it right over here. There's another book, the Real Facts about Ethiopia. I mentioned it before. Here we go. Yeah. There we go. This particular book right here. So we want to maybe call this vid. Okay. Call this vid right here. All right. Call this vid. This is by J.A. Rogers, one who was an actual eyewitness, one of the sons or fathers of our people. All right. By J.A. Rogers. His Majesty Haile Selassie first, astutest living statesman. When the European diplomats brought war to his door, he threw it back amongst them. Right? That's this book right here. All right? Okay. So, now, what do we have here? Okay, so in this particular book, it might be in this book, but there's some coronation pictures. You know that's an important subject matter, but make a note of it. There's these two. We're gonna actually, when we get both of them, put them side by side so ones can see, and then give some footer or some additional information. But we're gonna call this Rastafari, well, Line of Judah Society, right? And other Rastafari mansions, and some notes that we have gleaned from this particular book, right, by Hans Valheim Lockett. And I think, let's see if we can find this page again. And I was sharing this in private, and we said, why don't we just record it for others, because some of this information we find that, first the Holy Spirit will lead you to some information, then you'll find that if you check it out, it will come in handy later on. And if you don't check it out, then you recognize later on that you didn't have everything you needed because you didn't make your will obedient to good influence. So therefore that wisdom to handle the experience would be lost in that given situation, and hopefully that's a minor situation, but who can tell? All right. So anyway, in the mission, we're on page 42, and on the mission on page 42, the writer Hans Valheim Lockett, he says right here that His Imperial Majesty, our Godfather and King of Kings, Abba, he saw the only way to progress as being in not disturbing the existing institutions but in letting them adapt of their own volition to changing conditions. Now, open parenthesis, it says the changes to take place as fast as possible, close parentheses, and thus grow into the new order. Now, of course, some folks are going to see this or hear this, and then they're going to say, oh, it's New World Order, as though these Gentiles, you know, and
was reading his writings online quite a bit, so I was quite happy to finally talk to him, and he's become a regular on the show. And well, frankly, and this doesn't happen very often in life, I have trouble finding areas where I would disagree with my guest today, and our guest is Darryl Eberhart. Welcome aboard, Darryl.
And thanks for the nice introduction. And I'm 61 years old. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that on any of the podcasts. So sometimes I get a little tuckered out and tired of fighting these guys. And but let me give your listeners kind of an introduction to me, both to the intel and the religious side, because I've got this great concern that they'll accuse, since I've been writing so much about Roman Catholicism, especially the Jesuit order, and I'm not comparing myself to Abraham Lincoln, but they, whenever they were plotting to assassinate Lincoln, they passed the word around that in a lot of the northern newspapers, as a matter of fact, that were Democratic newspapers, and actually Lincoln claimed up to half of the newspapers in his time were controlled by the Roman Catholic Church. But they accused him of being a baptized Catholic who had gone astray. They figured that would steady the arms of the Roman Catholic assassins, and a lot of the low-level conspirators were Roman Catholic. And I just wanted to let people know that I have never been a Roman Catholic. I was never secretly baptized as a Roman Catholic. I am not an apostate Catholic, although I do know quite a bit about the Catholic Church. But anyway, let me tell them about my intel. I spent 26 years in the intelligence community, and 20 years of that was U.S. military. I'm a retired military. 11 and a half years in the U.S. Air Force intelligence, and 8 and a half years in Army intelligence. And then after I retired from the military, I worked 6 years as a Department of Defense civilian at the National Security Agency, largely because I got trained in Russian and Arabic languages. I had worked as an analyst, a linguist, a reporter, and then later I got a direct commission to captain. So I was then in military intelligence. I was a chief warrant officer before then, after I'd switched over from the Air Force. And I'd been writing 2 newsletters for the past decade plus, tackling the tough topics and examining the tough issues. And when I first started writing, I just pretty much, just spoke in general terms of the globalist rich elite, talked a little bit about what are actually just front groups, the Council on Foreign Relations and the Bilderbergers, etc. And even when I did
Milner's Kindergarten and all of those, yeah.
Yeah.
they're front groups, you're right.
Yeah, they're just 100% front groups. And as a matter of fact, a lot of smaller groups within the secret societies are front groups for the Jesuits. The Jesuits, as I have maintained, and others, like Greg Szymanski, Eric John Phelps, all of our research ties together and confirms what each of us has worked on separately, and it goes back to a lot of guys who have written good books like Edmund Paris, The Secret History of the Jesuits. It just all dovetails and points to the same point, and that is that the Jesuits sit at the very top of the secret society's pyramid, controlling Freemasonry, controlling their own Jesuit order, and through that, controlling the entire hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church, because the Black Pope actually rules over the White Pope. He's the Black Pope, the Jesuit Superior General, is the power behind the throne of the White Pope, the one that we see patting children on heads. But the real leader of the Roman Catholic hierarchy is the Jesuit Superior General, who's also in charge of the very wealthy Knights of Malta, who are co-located and headquartered at the Jesuit Superior General's palace there in the Vatican. So this man is by far, I think, the most powerful man in the world, and through the wealth he controls through the Vatican Bank, and again through these wealthy Knights of Malta, who hold a lot of key banking positions. The Rothschilds, people like to point to them and say that they're, hey, look, these are Jews and they're running everything. The Rothschilds are Jesuits who just happen to have a Jewish background, but one of their titles is Guardians of the Vatican Treasury, and that ought to tell us something.
They're employees.
Yeah, exactly. And so anyway, I just wanted to let them know that I've got a good background in intelligence, but interestingly, despite having for 26 years, there are almost the full 26 years, I had a top secret special intelligence clearance with all kinds of extra caveats and that, and I knew almost nothing about the Jesuits. I knew a little bit about the Catholic Church, and I'll explain why, with my religious background here. And I was raised Methodist. My mom was Methodist. My dad was Roman Catholic, but my dad got in trouble because he didn't raise us Catholic, and the priest was angry with him for years. So, again, I was never baptized a Roman Catholic, and I didn't go to a Roman Catholic church till I actually got in my 20s. I went a couple times with my dad to Mass. But again, I was raised Methodist. Now, I have to say this, 90% of my relatives are Roman Catholic, including my dad is over 80 years in the Catholic Church. 90% of my friends are Roman Catholic because I'm in a very heavily Roman Catholic area that anywhere you go in any direction, about 5 to 6 miles until you get down off the mountain, it's either 70 to 90% Roman Catholic or higher. So I live in a very, decades ago, by the way, I married a beautiful and wonderful Roman Catholic lady, and that's when I took Roman Catholic catechism classes. I was still in the Air Force up at Syracuse University studying Russian language, and I went to those classes, and I never converted to Catholicism. As a matter of fact, the priest kind of threw me out after about 6 sessions because I kept asking questions. And I wasn't a Bible scholar at the time, but I had read enough of the Bible to, just raise questions like, hey, Jesus Christ healed Peter's mother-in-law, and Paul said that Peter, Simon, took his wife with him when he went around. It sounds like Peter was married. Why do you guys have to be celibate priests when, it looks like Peter had a wife there? And the priest said, is that in the Bible? And then I nailed him on about 4 or 5 other things, and it finally just came up after about the 6th session to put his arm around me because I was embarrassing him by asking him questions he couldn't answer. And or making him look stupid because he kept saying, is that it really in the Bible? I'd say, yeah, it is. I says, why do you, just give one more example. I said, Christ said, don't call anyone on earth father. Now, obviously he's not talking about your earthly daddy, but he was talking in a religious. So why do we have to call you guys father? And he goes, is that in the Bible? I said, yeah, it is. And I'll give one more. It is because it's good. Yeah. And I goes, Jesus Christ said, we shouldn't do repetitious prayers like the heathen do. Why do you guys pray the rosary and just keep going over the same thing over and over and over again? And he goes, is that in the Bible? And I'm not picking just on Catholic priests because I knew 6 Methodist ministers, and I'd say probably about 4 or 5 of them didn't know that much about the Bible. As a matter of fact, their main training was in administration and raising money and public speaking and running socials and things like that. Yes, and I think, as a matter of fact, the last couple of Methodist ministers that I knew said they only had one Bible course when they were in. And, of course, Roman Catholic priests, if you talk to ex-priests and that, they get very little Bible training, and theirs is almost all the traditions of the church, old church fathers, especially the ones that the Catholics consider the most important. And that's their main study. They also don't get into the Bible. So anyway, because of that, this guy, he just came up, put his arm around me and said, you don't have to come back anymore, my son. And I didn't want to go back anymore anyway, Gordon, because the snow was getting about 3 to 4 feet deep up in Syracuse. Had a hellacious winter that year, and so it worked out well, but he definitely didn't want me to come back. So I am not Roman Catholic, although I love a lot of individual Roman Catholics, and I want to just make that point. Again, I just went to Mass a couple times with my dad, kind of rebellious there because I was kind of disgusted by the Methodist Church. And then for 6 or 7 years, I went to independent fundamental churches here when I came back after leaving the National Security Agency, and I got so disgusted with them because everything was pre-trib rapture. Once saved, always saved. We're not to be involved in fighting evil. We're only here to win souls, and we're to obey government no matter how evil it is, don't you know? And that just drove me crazy. So basically, I just read the Bible, and I get together with a couple of friends. And by the way, before we finish, I'd like to give a book. It's the best book for giving to a Roman Catholic that really, in a nice and kind way, it's Lorraine Bettner's book called Roman Catholicism. They've attacked this man horribly. It was written, I think, in 1962. But Roman Catholics tell me it's the best book to give to a Roman Catholic to witness to them as to the unbiblical, unscriptural doctrines and practices in the church, because Bettner, he's a man, Lorraine Bettner, just runs comparisons. This is what the Bible says. This is what the Catholic Church does or practices or says, and anyone who looks at that with an honest and open heart is going to see that basically, and I don't know how to say it in a kinder way or anything or more. Roman Catholicism is basically paganism with a very thin Christian veneer. And the sad part is that there are Roman Catholics, and I know Roman Catholics that are real Christians that are in that church. And maybe before we get done, we'll read that verse, Revelation 18:4, where it says, "Come out of her, my people." But
Darryl, I took your advice. Last year I heard you talk about that Lorraine Bettner book, and I have one of my best friends is an ex-priest. Now, he still attends Mass, but he's no longer a priest. Great guy. I bought a copy of that book and gave it to him last year, and we talked. He was talking about. You could tell it was really making him think, but I haven't heard back from him in a few months, so it'll be interesting when I do hook up with him again.
Well, the good news I have is that my best friend and his wife, and he was a Eucharistic minister, she taught, I forget the catechism-type classes in the church school, and both very, very devout Roman Catholics, both from devout Roman Catholic, large Roman Catholic families, and after over 50 years, each of them in the Roman Catholic Church, by reading the Bible and Bettner's book, they came out of the church. So it's not an impossibility. It does happen. And Roman Catholics, many of them have no idea. They know there's some evil at the top because of the pedophile priest thing, but many of them have no idea, because most of them do not read the Bible. They have no idea of how many Catholic practices like celibacy, infallibility, purgatory, indulgences, mass cards for the dead, people trying to pay and pray their relatives out of purgatory, that none of that's in the Bible. As a matter of fact, I challenge Catholics when I meet them, hey, sit down and read your Catholic Bible and see if you can find one pope. See if you can find one cardinal. See if you can find one archbishop. That whole entire hierarchical system is not there in the Bible. As a matter of fact, Paul and Peter, examples in the New Testament, when anyone ran up and fell at their feet and tried to kiss their toes or praise them as gods, they said, "Get up, get up, get up. We're just men like you."
Yeah.
And compare that to the Pope, many of the popes that have lived in such wealth and with many palaces, and the cardinals the same way, and again through selling indulgences was what got Luther so fired up. A lot of people forget that some of the reformers were Roman Catholics. Luther was an Augustinian monk who tried so hard to reform the system from within. And the Dominican Girolamo Savonarola, who was in Florence, led a great revival. He made one little mistake. He criticized, I think it was Pope Alexander VI, his corrupt papal court, and of course he was immediately excommunicated and murdered, exterminated, executed, and that happens so frequently throughout history. We need to remember that many courageous Roman Catholics have tried to challenge the system from within, And papal Rome, does not like to be challenged about anything. I'd like to read just a couple little things that I threw in some of my writings when I started writing more and more about Roman Catholicism. It'll repeat a little bit what I said, but I think people need to know this. And here's a little statement I put in some of my newsletters when I started to really go after the Jesuit order. I am not a Roman Catholic. I also am most definitely not anti-Roman Catholic as far as individual Roman Catholics go. My dad, 90% of my relatives are Roman Catholic, and the majority of my friends are Roman Catholic, still to this day, I might add. I am, however, against the top levels of secret societies, from the hierarchy of the Jesuit order to the hierarchy of Freemasonry. And by the way, if I can find that quote, I'll read it later, but there was a historian that said, if you trace up to the very top of Freemasonry, you will find out that the leader of the head Freemason in the world and the Jesuit superior general are one and the same person. And we need to remember that the Jesuit order took over French and British and German Freemasonry over a century ago. So the Jesuit order controls the higher levels of Freemasonry, which gives them so much power, because when you start looking at the intelligence community, Gordon, you find out that just about every head of the Central Intelligence Agency was either a 33-degree Freemason, like Alan Dulles, whom John Fitzgerald Kennedy fired, or they were Knights of Malta, which is a religious military order within the Roman Catholic Church under the direct command of the Jesuit Superior General. I think that's kind of interesting. 5 Knights of Malta. The first one that was in charge was William Wild Bill Donovan. You had John McCone, William Casey, William Colby, and George Tennant. There's at least 5, plus the head of the long of counterintelligence in the Central Intelligence Agency, also sat the Vatican desk, and the Israel desk was James Jesus Angleton, who just happened to be the CIA liaison to the Warren Commission, and you can tell. And another Knight of Malta in the FBI, one of the assistant FBI directors, Cartha DeLoach, just happened to be the FBI liaison to the Warren Commission, Whitewash Commission, I call it, and we can tell the flow of information that went to the Warren Commission was completely sanitized and edited by these 2 Knights of Malta. So when you start looking at that in World War II, where the head of Soviet intelligence is a Knight of Malta who uses Jesuit priests for his couriers, named Prince Anton Turkel. You look at the German intelligence on the Eastern Front, it's run by a Roman Catholic Knight of Malta named Reinhard Gehlen, who ends up after the war coming over and helping Donovan, who was head of the old Office of Strategic Services, the predecessor, the CIA. They set up the CIA together. 2 Roman Catholic Knights of Malta. By the way, William Joseph Wild Bill Donovan, I have a picture of him getting the Order of Sylvester there at the Vatican. The man was heavily decorated by the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, for his lifetime of service to the Catholic Church, even while he was the head of the OSS and then afterwards as a CIA director. So isn't that kind of interesting, Gordon, that these guys are getting awards? Our top intelligence guys are getting awards from the Roman Catholic Church.
Well, as you know, the Bible talks a lot about nations being empowered by demonic entities. And when you read through that litany of the crossovers between the Nazi echelon that were hooked up with the Knights of Malta, how they just very easily made that transition from crumbling Nazi Germany to rising United States 20th century power. And it's almost, boy, to me, I can just envision those demons crossing over from the Nazis to us, and we're seeing the fruits of that now all around us with entities like Blackwater and, of course, all of the draconian legislation like the Patriot Act.
That includes stuff that says that the president's allowed to torture people.
Yes.
And where does torture come from? It doesn't come from any Protestant church. It doesn't come from any evangelical or independent fundamental church. There's only one church that is really tortured like big time, and that is the Roman Catholic Church. And the Inquisition alone, from, according to several reputable historians that officially ran 1203 to 1808, butchered up to 50 million Bible-believing Christians. And while I mentioned that, I think it's important that everybody get a DVD. It's only $6. I don't know if you've ever had Richard Bennett on. He's an ex-priest of 22 years, but he did this DVD on the Inquisition. It's subtitled 605 Years of Papal Torture and Death. It's 58 minutes long. It's in color, and if you don't mind, I'll tell them how to get it.
Sure, yeah.
It's $6 postage paid. In other words, it includes the shipping and handling, so these guys not making hardly a penny off of it. But if you get this DVD, like I said, it's 58 minutes in color, very professionally done, has nice music on it. As a matter of fact, has an introductory song about the Inquisition. But the first two-thirds of the DVD deals with that official Inquisition that took the lives, again, of up to 50 million Bible-believing Christians. Many women were burned. And you think with wet wood and just slowly roasted and toasted at the stake, how cruel. 80 popes in a row approved the Inquisition. But again, it's very professionally done, and the first two-thirds deals with that 1203 to 1808 time frame. But the last third deals with that forgotten Holocaust. Some people call it the Vatican Holocaust. And they're talking about in Croatia in the 1940s. Croatia was a part of Yugoslavia, then broke away, became a puppet state to the Nazis. And this fascist state butchered, tortured up to 1 million innocent Serb Orthodox Christians. Men, women, and children, to the point where they impaled children alive on stakes. They crucified Orthodox priests to wooden doors. They skinned people alive. They buried people alive. They burned people alive. They sawed them. They cut their eyes out, made necklaces from them, and I know you're very familiar with this.
Yeah, I read that book, The Vatican's Holocaust by Avro Manhattan. Yeah.
And he has pictures in there of both the perpetrators
smiling as they're sawing through some guy's neck. Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, and we need to think about this because there are 10 FEMA regions in the U.S. There are 10 Jesuit provincials assigned to the U.S. I don't think that's coincidence. And when we think that 2 Jesuit prelates, they were Jesuit monsignors who were in archbishop positions in Zagreb and Sarajevo, respectively. Aloysius Stepanich, who also was the military vicar to the Ustashi military killing squads that ran around, and Ivan Sarich. And so these 2 Jesuit archbishops ran this and choreographed this horrible religicide, basically.
And the people who led the bloodthirsty mobs were Franciscan priests, correct?
Yes. And some of the worst commandants were, like you said, Franciscan priests, monks, and friars. They sometimes led the Ustashi units, and if they weren't the actual officer in charge, then they were an advisor that participated in and urged the torture. And as the one writer wrote, he said they weren't content just to kill people. They had to horribly torture them first. So this, it boggles the mind of people who have not been brought up Roman Catholic and who do not know the history of the Roman Catholic Church to think of a church that calls itself Christian doing this type of thing. And then,
so that was a carryover. That was still the Inquisition, right? The Inquisition never really officially went away.
No, and that was a modern-day Inquisition that we need to look at because, as one writer, I think it was Manhattan himself, said, it serves as a model of what the Roman Catholic Church would like to do if they could ever, wherever they have power, to establish themselves as the state church and to totally, as the one Edmund Paris wrote, convert or die with everyone else. And of course, some of the Orthodox people did convert, but again, this DVD it's critical for people to see whether they're Roman Catholic or non-Roman Catholic to see the barbarity of all this. And you can get that again for just ask for the DVD, The Inquisition, and it's $6. And you would make your check or money order payable to Richard Bennett, and Bennett has 2 N's and 2 T's in it, BENNETT. So Richard Bennett, make the check or money order payable to him and mail it to Richard Bennett, P.O. Box 192. I'll give it twice, P.O. Box 192, Del Val, it's 2 words, D-E-L space V as in victory, A-L-L-E, Del Val, Texas, TX, 78617. Again, $6, and he allows people to make unlimited reproductions of it. So if you get it and like it, you can just make as many copies as you'd like. Make your check or money order to Richard Bennett, and mail it to Richard Bennett, P.O. Box 192, Del Val, 2 words, D-E-L-V-A-L-L-E, Texas, TX, 78617. And that's probably the top thing I recommend people, because almost everyone can afford $6, and it's a very well done. It's 2 guys do it, an ex-priest of 22 years, I believe, Richard Bennett, he's down there in Texas, and Michael D. Simlian. Both these guys have written numerous books, and they do an excellent job, and there's no unnecessary acrimony or any viciousness about it. It's just very professionally done, and I urge everyone, whether they're Catholic or non-Catholic, to get that DVD and watch it, because if we don't learn the lessons of history, as Santayana said, those lessons repeat, and God help us if we, when FEMA takes over and the governors are, the real power behind them are those 10 Jesuit provincials, because we know what these people can do. Here's a little thing I'd like to read about. I had stuck into several of the newsletters when I started writing more about Roman Catholicism. I put, why am I writing more and more about Roman Catholicism? I've been writing more on the Roman Catholic Church's hierarchy, and especially its Jesuit order in recent newsletters, because I keep uncovering more and more about the deep hatred that the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church has for independent Bible-believing Christians, Protestants, Orthodox Christians, and Jews. And by the way, during World War II, it was just a bloodbath that mainly went after Protestants in northern Germany, Orthodox Christians, not just in Serbia, but in Russia and the Ukraine, and of course Jews, and up to 6 million Jews, despite all of these people that try to say that there were only a couple 100,000. No, I've seen the actual pictures of the bulldozing of the bodies and that when the American soldiers went into camp. So that's, go ahead.
Let me derail you quickly here, because you just prompted something. Darryl, do you think, as I strongly suspect, that not only during World War II, not only what happened in Croatia with the mass murder and torture of the Serbs, not only was that a carryover of the same Inquisition, but do you think, given that Hitler is still to this day a Catholic in title, he never was excommunicated, and given that it was guys like Franz von Papen, who was he a cardinal or an archbishop?
No, he was a Knight of Malta.
Knight of Malta, okay.
Yeah, and he put Hitler into power.
He put Hitler into power, and as we know, Knights of Malta are under the auspices of the Vatican. Do you consider that the far more infamous Holocaust of that we see so many movies and books about, like Schindler's List and whatnot, do you think that also was a carryover of the Inquisition?
Without doubt. There's no doubt in my mind that that was another. It was just part of the modern day Inquisition. Serbia wasn't the only one. World War II was an entire Inquisition that the Catholic Church has long hated Orthodox Christians, and that's why the Nazi SS units, a lot of them in the Central Security Service and that, they were priests that put on the black uniform. The head of the Nazi SS was not little pug-nosed nephew Heinrich Himmler, Kurt Heinrich Himmler. The real head of it was his uncle, who was a Roman Catholic priest, a Jesuit.
That's right. Yeah.
Subordinate to the Jesuit Superior General Ledikowski. But those priests followed in with the killer units, just like the Ustashi had the Franciscan priests, monks, and friars. These Jesuit priests and other Roman Catholic priests were even wearing the black uniform of the Nazi SS, and they were with the killer squads that came in behind the regular German military whenever they, invaded into Ukraine and then further into the Soviet Union. So, yeah, it was Eric John Phelps, when I first looked at his book, I thought, wow, could it be that this thing was just totally orchestrated to slaughter as many Protestants and Jews and Orthodox Christians as possible? And I don't know how anyone can really take an honest look at World War II and not come to that conclusion. Where did almost all the firebombing take place? in northern Germany, not in Catholic Bavaria. What happened to the poor German Protestants up in the northeastern parts, like in Prussia and that? They were force-marched during winter. Women and children died along the way. Some people think up to 1 million. With that, and the people that died in the camps in the northern part, the Americans in British camps were horrible. They allowed malnutrition. They allowed the weather and everything, exposure of these people. They were horribly treated. The amount of food they were given in that, like I said, force-marched in the middle of winter. And then, of course, the Jews, they went after them big time, and then the Orthodox Christians. So I don't see how anyone can really be honest, whether he's Roman Catholic or non-Roman Catholic, look at World War II and not just see just a massive religious side that was orchestrated by having Knights of Malta running the intelligence services on both sides. And we all need to keep that in mind. I worked 26 years in the intelligence community. When you have top positions like the CIA counterintelligence desk, when you hold the head of the CIA, the head of the FBI, then you can murder anybody. And that's what happened with John Kennedy, and then cover it up because you have all your people at the key choke points, and no mid-level analyst or something's going to be able to get anything. He'll get murdered if he tries to go outside of channels, and that's what they did with the two liaison positions with Kennedy and everyone around Kennedy. And that's something that you and I have talked about before, is the alternative media. Much of it blames everything on the Jews, mentioning the Rothschilds and that, or the head of the Federal Reserve, and not ever getting to the secret societies and the control of the secret societies by the Jesuit Superior General, where they have control of these, not only the intelligence agencies, but they are able then to use, through the CIA cooperation with Special Forces, Navy SEALs, they are able to use our most elite military to murder people and cover it up. And having key people in Congress, almost every key committee is held by a Roman Catholic generally. It's interesting. I started, when I was updating some of my news articles, I might as well tell this story, and you know it. At one time, I had 106 articles up on the web. 106. Yeah. And a lot of them dealt with assassination, like the assassination of Kennedy, the assassination of John Paul I, the assassination of Oscar Romero, the Archbishop down in El Salvador, and the assassination of Lincoln. And when you look around and start digging a little bit outside of mainstream publishing and the current American textbooks, you find out in all of these that the culprits are the Jesuits and the rest of the Vatican, the papacy. Clearly their fingerprints are all over the assassination of Lincoln. My goodness, they even helped John Harrison Surratt to escape up to Canada, where two Roman Catholic priests hide him out, one of the arch conspirators, and then they ferry him over to England and down to the papacy, where he becomes part of the Pope's own personal bodyguard in a Zouave company. So to have that kind of power. But Bert McCarty in her book pointed out that during the time, and she wrote an interesting book, The Suppressed Truth, about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. When that book was published in 1924, and when she did, she's got a great quote in there, and I'll just paraphrase it because I don't have it right in front of me, but she said that during the Wilson administration, that would have been, he served 2 terms, I think that would be 1913 to 1921. Remember, he's the president, said, I'll never send your boys overseas, just like FDR later. But anyway, she said during his administration, the office of the head of the Army, the head of the Navy, the head of the emergency fleet, the head of the post office, and she named a couple others, and she said just about every single department in the U.S. government. Now remember, this is in the 1920s, the early 20s. She said was held by a 4th-degree Knight of Columbus. Now, the Roman Catholic population at that time was 1/6 the entire U.S. population. But they're holding every single key position. Lincoln said that in his time, half of the newspapers, I mentioned it earlier, half the newspapers were run by the Roman Catholic Church. And then Tupper Saucy, when he came out with his book, Rulers of Evil, showed how in the Reagan administration almost all his top advisors were Roman Catholic, and almost every key position, intelligence, finance, in both the Senate and the House, were all held by Roman Catholics. And it's interesting when you think back, Gordon, if you go to an independent fundamental church, you'll find out these guys have all been taught in their seminaries, we don't get involved in politics. But when you go to Roman Catholic churches, when they have their Knights of Columbus and they try to recruit the young Roman Catholics into that, they tell their people, get into law enforcement, get into government, become mayor, become governor, become president. And they tell, so they're talking two sides there. They infiltrate, and that's, Protestants have trouble understanding that, because we wouldn't think of infiltrating a Catholic church. But the Jesuits are masters of infiltration, and they have their people infiltrate even seminaries of these independent fundamental associations and everything, and they tell these people, now you need to obey government no matter how evil it is, no matter how fascist it is, because don't you know government's from God, and you guys need to stay out of politics. You're only here to win souls. You don't get involved in anything. And then they're telling their people, get involved in law enforcement, get involved in politics. You go to a lot of these northeastern cities, Midwest, North, Chicago, New York, Boston, you'll find out that a very large number of the police officers, especially in the middle and higher levels, are Knights of Columbus. And you can see that on a website, spirituallysmart.com. It's under Blue Mass, spirituallysmart.com. I think it's one of the first ones in his left-hand column on his home page. He has Blue Mass there, and they have all kinds of pictures. Jeb Bush is a fourth degree, I believe, Knight of Columbus. They have a picture of him getting his ceremony there. They have a picture of the current baby Bush, shaking hands with a bunch of Knights of Columbus. They have pictures of some of these top people in the New York police force. I think one of them was a former Homeland Security or FEMA female that was a very high-ranking one. They're all Knights of Columbus. So what does that bode for us? We need to remember something, Gordon, and that is that the Ustashi was a Roman Catholic militia called Catholic Action in Yugoslavia. Whenever the German troops poured across the border, these people turned on their own government, turned on their own constitution, their own people, and betrayed them, and showed the Nazis, I should say the German troops, where the arms were stored, where aircraft were hidden away, and they basically were a fifth column. And I hope that most of the listeners understand that fifth column from the Spanish Civil War there, where General Mola said, and Franco said he had a fifth column. In other words, he had people friendly to him behind the enemy's line pretending to be good guys when they were actually betraying them. But he claimed to have in Madrid to have a fifth column. Well, throughout all of Europe, in World War II, there were fifth columns in France and Yugoslavia that betrayed their own people, their own country, their own government, their own military.
They assassinated that King Alexander of Yugoslavia.
Right. But the Ustashi, we need to remember, was a Roman Catholic militia, basically a terrorist group before World War II. And then once Pavlovich was put into power there, Ante Pavlovich, an interesting character who said a good Ustashi is someone who can cut a child out of its mother's womb, and having the two archbishops there. Once they took power, well, guess what happened to the Roman Catholic militia, Catholic Action, Ustashi? They became the regular military forces, and they went around being the killer squads. And people need to think. I've heard 1.5 million to 2 million strong for the Knights of Columbus. There's signs all over where I live. I mean, you see all these signs. They have chapters and stuff. They sell insurance. They sell little gambling tickets, basically, that are based on the lottery here in Pennsylvania. These guys are wealthy. They're powerful, and we need to think: what are they gonna do when we go under total martial law in a fascist state here? Are these guys going to be just like the Ustashi in Croatia? That's something to think about, because the Knights, and you've probably seen it, that fourth degree oath of the Knights of Columbus. Now they've probably mellowed it some, but it was a horrible blood oath that was read into the congressional record in the early 1900s. Knights of Columbus, we don't need militias that have an oath to a foreign potentate, and that's what the Pope is. And if people think that's hard, it's just the truth.
Darryl,
and Go ahead.
When you say foreign potentate, now that brings up a good point, because we talk a lot about the dangers of Roman Catholicism and the Jesuits and the upper echelon of that hierarchy, but that upper echelon, foreign potentate, isn't the real threat. The real source of all this threat is that the Vatican, because the Vatican, people think it's part just a religious system still. No, that's a nation state, is it not?
It is. The Vatican State has diplomatic relations with something like over 80 or 100 countries, I forget. But they're a member of the United Nations. The Pope goes and speaks there, and I'm pretty sure they are. And I know they've got diplomatic relations with all of the major countries in the world. As a matter of fact, they were restored with Mussolini in the Concordat that he signed with the papacy. And of course, some people tend to forget Hitler also signed a Concordat with the papacy. And you mentioned earlier, Hitler was never excommunicated. Neither was Mussolini. As a matter of fact, when Hitler died, or some people say he didn't really die, he went to Argentina. But anyway, when he was supposedly committed suicide, they had a high requiem mass for him in Spain, officiated, I think, by 3 Roman Catholics. Generally, that's only for like a cardinal or something. And they had that for him. But Mussolini, Hitler, none of the worst of these mass murderers was ever excommunicated by the Roman Catholic Church. How could they? These guys were working for them. You know, that's not good PR within your own camp if you excommunicate your top murderers that carry out your orders for you. Let me go ahead and finish a little bit here. I put here, we Americans have for the most part. Oh, let's say one other thing. You mentioned a good point. So a lot of people tend to think of Roman Catholicism as just a religion. No, the Roman Catholic Church is probably the most powerful geopolitical faction in the world because of controlling secret societies, plus having a billion adherents, plus having a Vatican bank, and then they have another bank too, but all their stock holdings in that, the Knights of Malta are big bankers, so they're filthy rich, and so we need to think of them, they are the most powerful, in my mind, geopolitical and financial power on the entire planet. They're not just a religion. So anyway, I put here, we Americans have, for the most part, been largely ignorant of the well-documented history of the Roman Catholic Church in conducting brutal religious genocide via Inquisition, holy wars, and holy crusades against all the aforementioned groups, talking again, Bible-believing Christians, Protestants, Orthodox Christians, and Jews. Sadly, many Americans believe the ecumenical rhetoric of the Roman Catholic Church's hierarchy, that she has changed her ways and now loves all the separated brethren. Well, we now know that the current Pope, Benedict XVI, has come out and said, well, that liberal stuff you kind of heard out of Vatican II is they're just spinning that the wrong way. You know, there's no salvation outside of the Roman Catholic Church, and I've got quotes somewhere by him and in some of his recent documents where he said any church that came out of the Protestant Reformation is not a church. So guess what, Protestants? You're back to being heretics and not separated brethren. And by the way, the ecumenical movement totally run by Roman Catholics. There's a Roman Catholic priest named Forrest and that, but you'll find it almost all of these, the Billy Graham things and that, there's always priests there. Paul and Jan Crouch, you could almost always see a priest in the background there. Jack Van Impe praises Mary and the Marian apparitions and the popes. So a lot of these so-called Protestant evangelists and that are just, well, Billy Graham himself has a honorary degree from a Roman Catholic Institute of Higher Learning. Go ahead.
They're all subverted.
Yeah, they're working for the other side. And we need to realize that these people are Pied Pipers. As a matter of fact, Billy Graham, when a Roman Catholic comes forward at his crusade, wanting to truly learn more about Christ, what does Billy Graham and his those counselors do? They turn them over to the local Roman Catholic Church. They go back to your Roman Catholic Church and learn there. I mean, again, I'm not trying to be mean to anyone because I love a lot of individual Roman Catholics, but Roman Catholicism is basically pagan. It's the old Babylonian religion.
It's paganism.
Religion, yeah. Yep. It's paganism with a thin veneer of Christianity. It moved into the power vacuum whenever the imperial pagan Roman Empire fell, and the Pope basically took over as the ghost rose from the ashes of the pagan imperial Roman Empire.
Darryl, this gets into eschatology. You have these pre-tribbers, these futurist Christians nowadays who are expecting some kind of revived Roman Empire in the future, and what they are obtusely not seeing is that when the secular government of Rome fell, just a few years went by, and then it morphed into basically what I'm trying to say is their revived Roman Empire is Roman Catholicism, because it carried on Rome and engulfed all the other states around it, infiltrated. So it's right in front of them. It's always been in front of them. It's always been the number one persecutor of
true Bible-believing Christians, including and I'm sure you covered the Waldenses. I know you read about them. You know how they treated the Waldenses, but they called the Albigenses, the Waldenses, heretics, Manichaeans, dualists, all kinds of dirty names, but they were basically just simple Bible-believing Christians who were always, let me repeat that, they didn't leave the Catholic Church. They were always outside the Catholic Church, and because Catholics in France and that started who would see, and they compared how the wonderful lives of these people. They were hardworking, industrious, moral people, and so the Catholic Church was starting to lose their adherents. Were leaving in droves to join these people, and that's when they crushed the entire southern population of southern France. They exterminated the Albigenses in a series of crusades. I think they started somewhere around 1208. And they basically used some of the same crusaders who had been down in the Middle East and turned them loose, and including rapists and murderers, out of the prisons to slaughter these people. And that's why I started writing more and more about Roman Catholicism, just because I don't know how to say this in any other way than the Roman Catholic Church is basically, especially the Jesuit order in the last 4 centuries, it's International Murder Incorporated. They're just mass murderers, masters of assassination of individuals, but also masters of religious genocide. And we need to speak out about it. Roman Catholics need to learn. I think if Roman Catholics in America could learn 1/10 of the history of their church, supposed church, but again, remember, it's an official nation state, the Vatican state, that was restored by Mussolini with his Concordat. I think it was in 1924. But anyway, by the way, Roman Catholicism also became the state religion again there. So the deadly wound kind of got healed there whenever they got back as a Vatican state. But the point, I'd like to let people know what my if you don't mind, let them know the website, because there's a lot of articles up there, and I have written more about Roman Catholicism. My website is toughissues.org. Issues is plural, tough. Issues, ISSUES.org. I had to change it. We'll back to that story. I had 106 articles up there on the web at one time, mostly newsletters, and they had been hacked into because I think I'd written about assassinations and the POWMIA issue. They don't like you to write about that, all the guys we left behind. And so it got messed with several times. We finally got it all back up on 2 different websites, and the one website was simply hooked into the first website, and the lady that was running it, and I won't go into detail here, but she pulled all 106 articles and newsletters I had up there because I'd used several quotes from Seventh-day Adventists. And unfortunately, I'd also used quotes by Hitler, but that didn't make me a Nazi. I'm not a Seventh-day Adventist, by the way. I'd used quotes by Stalin. That didn't make me a communist. But anyway, I'll use quotes by anybody if I think they're pretty good. But anyway, the 106 got knocked out, and I've been slowly rebuilding it back, and I've got 39 articles up there. And since you and I have both been talking about genocide here, I would really like the listeners to just read 2 articles I got up there. One's called Bloody Hands and Wicked Hearts. It'll just show up under Bloody Hands. The other one is Death by Government and Death by Church. It'll show up there, Death by Government. Read Bloody Hands and Death by Government, and you'll find out it's not the Jews, the Zionist Jews that are running around fomenting all the wars and fomenting World War I and World War II. It is the Roman Catholic Church, very clearly. And there was a man named Edmund Paris who was born Roman Catholic, a French author who wrote several books like Convert or Die, but he wrote The Secret History of the Jesuits. People can still get that from Jack Chick Publications. And that's why I'm recommending they go up there and read my articles, my newsletters, because I give a lot of books, so I won't give any more. They can, other than I want to give them Bettner's before we close up. But they need to read those so that they can see I've got all different kinds of websites they can go and look at, and I've got books and DVDs and that. I don't sell anything, but I recommend that they to get those materials to do more in-depth research for themselves. Go ahead, Gordon.
We spoke of that book, Roman Catholicism, by Lorraine Bettner, as maybe the best book to give your Roman Catholic friends to get them out of that system, to wake them up. But just if people are interested in checking that out, that last name Bettner, it's a very unusual spelling, is it not? We should probably spell it for them.
Right, and I'll give them that information now because we've got about 10 minutes left or so. The book is simply called Roman Catholicism, and it's by Lorraine Bettner, L-O-R-A-I-N-E. Bettner is spelled B-O-E, T is in Tango, T is in Tango, N-E-R. But if they just ask for the book Roman Catholicism and even spell close to Bettner, they can get it. It was published in 1962. It's a 466-page paperback book, and I'll have to give them an address because these people don't take credit cards. It's for that large of a book. It's got a really nice index in it, annexes. It's $15 postage paid. That includes your shipping and handling, and you get it through the conversion center. So make your check or money order for $15, payable to the Conversion Center, and mail it to the same place, the Conversion Center. I'll give the address twice. P.O. Box 265, Carthage, like the old Carthage in North Africa, C-A-R-T-H-A-G-E, North Carolina, NC 28327. So again, $15, check or money order payable to the Conversion Center. Mail it to the Conversion Center, P.O. Box 265, Carthage, C-A-R-T-H-A-G-E, North Carolina, November Charlie, 28327. Folks can tell I was in the military, NATO phonetics there. But anyway, it's my best friend and his wife. They have 4 children, and they gave him Dave Hunt's book, and it really turned him off. Dave Hunt's book is a great book, Woman Rides the Beast. I like it, but I've heard from several Catholics that it really turns Catholics off.
It's all factual, but it's too much at once.
Yes.
For newcomers.
And it's a good book. If you're a non-Catholic, I would highly recommend. You can get that from Chick Publications. And again, my newsletters will tell you how to get those books. But A Woman Rides the Beast is a great book for a non-Catholic because it gets into their doctrines in the back. Like he gets into papal infallibility quite a bit, celibacy and purgatory, and he'll give you definitions of all of them. But he gets a lot into the genocide, too.
Yeah, the sordid history of the popes, Hunt gets into in spades.
Yes, he does a very good job. So, again, but if you want to hand something to a Roman Catholic to read because you want them to see that their church's practices and doctrines are unbiblical, unscriptural, Roman Catholicism is the best book, and I tell you why. That man has been horribly attacked by the Roman Catholic Church because he's right on the money. And again, he doesn't do it in a caustic and vitriolic, nasty manner. He just lays it out nice and just pleasant, and just saying, here it is. This is what the Bible says. This is what the Catholic Church says. So I highly recommend it. You get that book and get it into the hands of your Catholic friends. It's much better received than most other books. Let me give a Bible verse here, and it's critical. We're very ignorant of history. We're also biblically ignorant in America, and I'm sure you're very well this verse, Hosea 4:6. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no priest to me, seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God. I will also forget thy children. That's pretty serious. We need to be Bible readers. You mentioned about the papacy and how easy it is to see. Some people try to predict who the Antichrist is going to be. Some people said it was Gorbachev with the little red mark on his head. Some people even said it was Reagan. There's Prince Charles. There's been many candidates. Mussolini was a candidate. Hitler was a candidate. You know, of course, these guys are dead now. Rather than trying to predict who the final CEO of the Satanic Kingdom is going to be, as that ex-priest of 22 years, Richard Bennett, points out on his DVD, The Inquisition, the Bible very clearly lays out that the papacy is the Antichrist. I'll just give you a couple of verses very quickly. In Revelation, and by the way, folks, Roman Catholic scholars who are prophecy scholars have come to the same conclusion. There's several of them. But in chapter 17 of Revelation, if you read 17 and 18, it pretty well nails it down. Talking about the great whore in verse 1, verse 2 says, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. Nobody, the papacy ruled with an iron fist, by the way, continental Europe for over 1,000 years. Anyway, it says the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. The Bible talks of that like a spiritual fornication. The woman sits on a scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads, this is key, and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet. Well, what are the colors that the cardinals and the archbishops wear in the Catholic Church? They wear purple and scarlet. Decked with gold and precious stones. Nobody has more gold than the Vatican. Verse 5, upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great. If you'll study the Roman Catholic, there's a good book by Hislop. It's a little dry, kind of scholarly, about the two Babylons. You'll see very closely that the priesthood in the Roman Catholic Church smells exactly, with the confessional, exactly like the Babylonian priesthood. Yep. But anyway, the great mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints. We just got done saying, if you get that DVD, you'll see 50 million Christians by reputable historians slaughtered by the Roman Catholic Church with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. The angel said, I will tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast that carrieth her. This is verse 7, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. Then you go down to verse 9. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Now, someone like Tex Mars says that's Jerusalem. But Jerusalem never ruled over all the kings of the earth. Some people say Rio de Janeiro has 7 hills. No, the only place with 7 hills that ruled over the kings of the earth for probably over 1,200 years was the Roman Catholic Church of Papacy. Crowned kings and emperors and deposed them. The few emperors and kings that ever went against the Pope, most of them lost on the battlefield because the Pope would rally several countries. Some people used to joke. Stalin said, well, how many divisions does the Pope have? The answer is he has as many divisions as the U.S. or the Soviets or whoever he's controlling.
They've infiltrated and decapitated those governments.
Exactly. And then verse 18 says, the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Again, that's the Israeli kings, king of Judah, even David and Solomon at their peak didn't rule over the kings of the earth. They ruled over maybe the kings of Edom and Moab and, the Syrians, but they didn't rule over the Assyrians. They didn't rule over the Babylonians. They didn't rule over the Chinese. But the papacy ruled over continental Europe for, like I said, over 1,000 years. But here's a verse that's kind of interesting. I used to say, I'm not telling Catholics to come out of the church. I am now. Verse 18 in Revelation 4, verse 4 says, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. The Bible says that papal Rome is going to get burned in the end. And I would say and I love, again, many individual Roman Catholics, get out of there. Not only is your church, which is a state, a geopolitical and financial entity, not only is it guilty of pedophilia to the maximum extreme, not only is it guilty of up to 40% of American nuns report being sexually abused. That you can find that in a Boston Globe article. I'm looking for the book, but it's in a great book called Lucifer's Lodge, Satanic Ritual Abuse in the Catholic Church, was written by a Roman Catholic named Kennedy. Not only is it guilty of all that, but if you'll read my Bloody Hearts article, you'll find out that the Roman Catholic Church, as Baron d'Epinay, the French statesman, said, its history is written in blood. Blood is what it's all about. the slaughtering Jews left and right. As you well know, Gordon, whenever the Roman Catholic Crusaders, not the Christian Crusaders, went into Antioch in I believe it was 1096. The Roman Catholic Crusaders slaughtered every man, woman, and child, Christian, Jew, and Muslim in Antioch. Then they went down, and in Jerusalem in 1099, they slaughtered just about it. There were a few Muslims that bought their way out, rich ones. But other than that, they slaughtered every man, woman, and child, other than the few that bought their way out. Jew, Muslim, and non-Catholic Christian, and that has been the history of that church. Before the Crusaders even went down to the Middle East, they went into the western provinces of Anjou and Puteaux and practiced up for the Crusades by slaughtering every Jew they could find, going through the villages of those western, I probably murdered the pronunciation, but those western provinces in France, they practiced up. And it's just, their entire history is nothing but religious genocide. Every 50 to 100 years, the Roman Catholic Church goes on a mass murder spree, and they did it as recently as the 1940s. And Gordon, that's why I think you're staying in and working hard at what you do, why I am too, because we smell what happened in Croatia, what happened all over the European continent in the 1940s, may be coming to a neighborhood near all of us soon here in America, like they used to talk about movies going around the drive-in theaters. It's coming to a neighborhood soon near us. And again, 10 FEMA regions, 10 Jesuit provincials assigned here, and we've got the fascist police state almost totally set up here in America. If Roman Catholics do not leave in droves as they did during the Reformation, the only thing that stopped this that flow was the sword and the stake that the Catholic Church wielded against its own people. Otherwise, Europe would be totally Protestant right now, and that's why the Inquisition was instituted and carried on, and again, 80 popes in a row. And if you're a Roman Catholic, get a book called The Vicars of Christ, The Dark Side of the Papacy by Peter de Rosa. There's a Roman Catholic that just gave you the real nitty-gritty of what the papacy was about. It was nothing but rich aristocratic families battling with each other. Most popes were murdered, by the way. Very few died natural deaths. Some mysterious, but many of them were murdered because they were fighting with each other for the coveted position because of all the wealth and power that it carried with it. So, again, we're not being mean. We don't hate Roman Catholics. We're just trying to warn you. Your system, it's not biblical. It's a murdering system, and it's a system full of pedophile priests, and it's a real sad story that it calls itself Christian. And in any country that Roman Catholicism, and then I tell my Catholic friends this, you're not going to like a Catholic police state here in fascist America. It's not going to be good for Catholics because the Inquisition didn't just kill Bible believers. Many Roman Catholics were, if they were wealthy, maybe you had a good-looking wife or daughter, they turned you in, and you went before the Inquisition, and very few people ever got acquitted from the Inquisition. By the way, most lawyers were not allowed to represent you. You couldn't see your accusers, so they had an almost 100% conviction rate, and that's why we're warning people, find out about this church geopolitical financial entity. Do a little bit of research. Check out, there's some great websites, spirituallysmart.com I mentioned. Also, Greg Szymanski's got a good one with a lot of articles about the Jesuits. ArcticBeacon.com, Arctic like an Arctic Circle, ARCTIC Beacon.com. I mentioned mine, ToughIssues.org. Check those out, and you're going to find out there's a lot of articles up there. VaticanAssassins.org is also a good one. Eric John Phelps. VaticanAssassins, plural, .org. He has a whole bunch of articles. So check it out. Do a little research. Check out this Jesuit order that has so much control in the intelligence community. A lot of the top military guys in the Pentagon are also Knights of Malta. Remember Alexander Haig? He was a Knight of Malta. So we need to basically, we need to get Roman Catholics out of that church, because anybody that's in the church supports the entire system, the hierarchy at the top. Whatever money you give, a lot of it gets sent up through the bishop, up to the archbishop, and to the cardinal, and so the papacy itself feeds off of, and American Catholics have been major contributors, and we need to get secret societies out of this country. There need to be no dual loyalties, Knights of Columbus, Knights of Malta that take an oath that goes back to the Jesuit superiors and right up to the Jesuit superior general and the White Pope. Anyone that takes an oath in the United States, it ought to be to the U.S. Constitution and not to something that's going to override that. And that's what happened, Gordon, in all of those countries in Western Europe and Central Europe, France, Yugoslavia, is that the Roman Catholics put their oaths that they had to their Ustashis, what we would see today, Knights of Columbus, Knights of Malta. That took priority over any oath they had to their own government and to their own countrymen. That's why it's critical that people learn about these systems, learn about secret societies, and learn about the Roman Catholic Church. And that's the only hope we have of saving America, is that we get back to people who are patriotic Americans and don't have an oath to a foreign potentate, whether it's the White Pope or the Black Pope. And I think you'll agree with that.
Oh, yeah. Are you good for a couple of more questions, Darryl? I know we haven't talked in a while. Well, first, just a comment or kudos, I guess. I think you hit the nail on the head that when Christians, when Bible-believing Christians nowadays are looking for who the Antichrist might be in the world around them and in Scripture, yes, they're being too myopic. They're looking through a microscope, and they need to put the microscope down, back off, and just use their own eyes and look around at the landscape around them, because they need to think in terms of systems. I think you're right. The Bible prophecy is much bigger than talking about a single entity very often. I think it's talking about an Antichrist system, as you said, nothing fits the bill more perfectly.
They need to read the book of Revelation. If you've never read it, some people say you can't understand it. It interprets itself. I just told you how about 5 verses after they say about the 7 hills or the mountains that the whore sits on, the angel says the 7 hills are, the 7 heads are 7 hills. There's a lot in there that the Bible interprets itself if you'll read it. But I think it's like starting around chapter 13, and if you read through 18, I don't see how anyone can read that and not see the papacy as the Antichrist, who butchered up to 50 million Bible-believing Christians. And that's all we're trying to warn about, and that's why I've written so much about genocide lately. Recently I started going against picking out some Roman Catholic doctrines, because the celibacy of the priests is a major problem with the pedophilia and with it's not just the nuns, women also have been horribly abused. And in that book, Lucifer's Lodge by Kennedy, he points out the problem with women being abused in the Catholic Church may be an even bigger iceberg there than the pedophilia, and that's something to really think about, because we know how big the pedophilia was. As you know, that's satanic at the top levels. The 2 previous popes, Benedict XVI, the current one, and Pope John Paul II, both helped protect pedophile priests as much as they could. It wasn't just the cardinals and archbishops moving them around from parish to parish once they were discovered, but they actually flew them out of the U.S. when law enforcement when we had some decent law enforcement trying to circle in and catch these guys, they flew them off to Rome and put them up in luxury hotels in Rome and protected them. So if anyone thinks that these popes are wonderful guys, by the way, we might add Pope Benedict XVI held at least, I believe, 5 terms, multiple terms. I think they were 5-year terms each, at the head of the Office of Inquisition. That is a little scary. The current pope is the Grand Inquisitor of probably about 25 years worth. And again, folks, please do check out the different resources I have listed in my newsletters, and check out some of those websites that I mentioned. Try to buy a couple of the books. The Secret History of the Jesuits is an excellent book. You can get it from Chick Publications. That stuff's all up on the website. And I don't want to take you too long here. We've gone about an hour and 5 minutes here. So do you have any other questions?
Yeah, just one last one, and then you can have the last word after that, by all means. But And you're probably going to have to speculate, but I don't know who I can talk to on this. Here, I'll just make it really succinct. Ralph Woodrow, did he succumb to senility, or did somebody get to him?
I don't know. All I know is they say he kind of recanted, but he sure as heck wrote a very, very good book, and I have it here. What was it, Babylon Mystery Religion or something? Yeah, an excellent book. It's no longer available, and that's why folks need to. You mentioned about books falling through the cracks. They need to get them. If the final word that I would say here is not only do we need to get really read up on history, because these guys murdered several U.S. presidents, we need to get read up on our Bibles. And about 15 years ago, I started reading the Bible from cover to cover, the King James Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. We don't have two Bibles. We have one Bible, and we need to read the Old Testament as well. Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Daniel, some really great reading in there. I realize some of it's a little dry at times, but you know what? Lincoln, when he was reading the Bible in the White House, or what was the equivalent, when the guy walked into his office, he saw him reading the Bible. He goes, "Mr. Lincoln, why are you reading the Bible?" Of course, this is what Roman Catholics tell a lot of their people. You can't understand it. And Lincoln says, no. He says, most of it is understandable. My problem is not with what I can't understand. My problem's obeying what I do understand. And most of the Bible is understandable, including the King James, which they claim is very archaic.
Especially the King James, yeah.
Yes. It's very easy to read. A lot of verses interpret themselves. Again, you'll see an archaic word, and three verses down, it'll give you a different word. So it's critical. We can't be biblical ignorant, or we're going to fall for all this false doctrine that's running around, like we have to obey government no matter how evil it is. We're going to be raptured out of here before anything gets bad. There's a lot of bad doctrine out there, and a lot of it I have traced to the Jesuits. Even the pre-trib rapture, there are a lot of Jesuits in and around the pre-trib rapture, and that's why people need to study that. And I want to thank you for your hard work and for interviewing people like me. People like Alex Jones and Stan Monteith, and that'll never have me on.
Oh, those guys are, propagandists at best. They might be something worse.